Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. Hi, and welcome back. This week, I wanted to start off with a public service announcement, if you will. Hopefully, you've noticed some changes in the style and direction of the show, where we have on 2 medical experts. I call them our residents, if you will. Dr. Taryn Clark, who's a neurologist, and Dr. Jennifer Dragonette, who's a therapist. And one of the reasons why I wanted to pivot in this direction is because I think our physical health and our mental health are key contributors to an overall successful life and wealth plan. And that may be a head scratcher, but as you've gotten to know me over the years and you've come to know this family office firm that I built called Tama, where wealth planning, portfolio management, and tax preparation and planning are all under one umbrella, I think it really highlights the work and the pivot that I've done over the last 3 to 4 years, where 70 to 80% of what I do is more behavioral finance than actual finance. Managing portfolios, doing tax preparation and planning, those are all key parts of a family's overall wealth management plan. That's never going to change. But there's a bigger component that I'm highlighting more and more that I think is a bigger driver is people's emotions and physical health. Because you've heard me say it once, you'll hear me say it 1,000 times. Your financial life is driven by your emotions, and your emotions help drive your financial life. Those two are completely intertwined. And so that's why I spend a lot of time talking about and focusing on mental health and physical health. And I couldn't think of 2 better experts in Dr. Taryn and Dr. Jen to have on the show on a more frequent basis to talk about these things. So again, if you have topics that you would like to talk about or have us discuss, please reach out. Our website, tamacapital.com. You find all of our information there. And we are here for you. We are here to discuss topics that you want to learn more about. It's a process of self-discovery. So with that ends the public service announcement of this episode. And speaking emotions, I want to dive into politics. Something, as you've probably heard me say before, I do my absolute best to keep out of people's portfolio. I work with Democrats, I work with Republicans, I work with independents. I do not have a feel or a strong feeling of who's going to win the next election. But it's something that people are talking about and asking me about as I go through this season of strategic reviews during planning season at Tama. And so I started doing some digging, doing some research, and talking to experts to crunch some data in this area of conversation today. And so for the listeners, I'll put the link to these charts I'm going to talk about. But I encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, which you can get the entire episode and see me and our guests talk live in person, or I guess recorded in person. But that's what I want to talk about today. And spoiler alert, it does not really matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House. So let's dig into some details. So I'm going to share my screen here. So this first slide that I'm showing is a history going back to basically 1949, 1950, which is when the S&P 500 index essentially started. And there's 3 points or data points on this. There's data that shows an open election field, meaning that the Democrat and Republican candidates are basically brand new. Then there's all election data, whether you have an incumbent or not an incumbent or 2 knowns, which is kind of what we have this year with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And then you have the year-to-date performance through, what are we looking at? Basically the middle of September. And by the time this recording comes out, it'll be almost the middle of October with a few more weeks to go in the election. But what I wanted to show this chart is because you can see that the only time we get negative returns, typically in an election year, is when we have an open field. And we don't have that this year. And a lot of people get really excited and emotional. There's that word again, emotional, and have this idea set in their mind. Well, it's an election year. We're going to have bad returns. It's going to be absolute chaos. And yeah, as you can see from the chart from this year, and again, apologize for those listening, but it's really showing that we had this strong start to the year. It dipped down, then we roared back, and then dipped down again, and then roared right back. Human roller coaster, generally what we call the stock market. So we are actually trending above all election years as far as returns go. So could that gap close between now and the end of the year? Certainly. But my point here is it doesn't matter that it's an election year. The stock market historically still outperforms. So that leads me into my next chart, compliments of Bespoke Investments. They are a great research firm. And the title of this slide is Don't Get Political. And you could see what they did is they said, okay, we're only going to invest in the S&P 500 when there's a Republican in presidency and when there's a Democrat in the Oval Office. So you can see since 1953, so Eisenhower's inauguration, if you only invested with a Republican, you generated $27,400 in return. So $1,000 invested turned into $27,400. If you invested that same $1,000, but only when a Democrat was in office, it does go up. You actually make more, $61,800, which for most people, they think is a head scratcher because most people have this idea that when a Republican is in office, the stock market does better. Well, this data kind of debunks that. But that's it's neither here nor there. The chart on the right is the one that I really want people to focus on. Yes, while there's a difference between a Republican and a Democrat, the point of this chart is that should not persuade you to get in or out of the market because that $1,000 invested in 1953 turned out to be $1.69 million across all presidents. So regardless of who was in office, you wanted to stay invested no matter who was in office, Republican or Democrat. And I think that is very powerful, which is why I went visual with this episode, because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when I saw this, and I saw this on the Compound and Friends with Mike Backnick and Josh Brown, shout out to you guys, who had Paul Hickey, who's one of the founders at Bespoke, and they were talking about this data. And I just thought to myself, the people listening to this, I owe them to see this data. The families I work with, they need to see this data because it points out that, again, this volatility that gets shoved in your face with mainstream media is just that noise. This is the data, and this is what drives me. And then I have one last chart that I created through one of my partners, and this shows the S&P performance throughout the various U.S. presidencies going back to the Kennedy administration. So like early 60s, early 60s. And so you could see this just highlights that point that I made from the last chart. It doesn't matter who's in office. The S&P 500 has withstood presidencies, scandals, wars, pandemics, recessions, you name it. It's just really resilient. And sometimes I have to stare at this chart on occasion to remind myself that time in the market is what matters the most, not timing the market. So, again, keeping politics out of the portfolio is really critical for ultimate success. Now that you've made it to the end of another great conversation, are you looking for more? If so, head over to tamacapital.com, where you will find all of our conversations. Use the search feature to find the topic or guest you would love to learn more about. Also, don't forget to make someone else's day by sharing our show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.